You might be hesitant to think about hiring a virtual assistant who's based overseas, and there are some absolute mistakes that people make. That's what I want to talk about this week, coming right up. Okay, so I'm not going to go into my backstory yet. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll mention towards the end of this video my interest in virtual assistants. I'll say right up front, I do run a virtual assistant company, but it's run as a social enterprise. It's not my day job. And I'll tell you all about that at the end of the video. But let's go through some of these mistakes that people commonly make. They're not all mistakes, they're considerations. So whatever size of organisation you are, you might be thinking, hey, this could be a good opportunity for us, hire some remote staff. Remote staffing has been around for a very long time. Here at Virtual Done Well, we have all kinds of clients utilising our staff. They can be, smaller businesses, coaching businesses. We've got dental practices. We've got orthopaedic surgeons. Sort of the smaller business end. We've got big corporates who utilise our services to help with customer service and things like that. So all kinds of businesses are accessing remote staff, virtual assistants now. But what are some of the mistakes they make? What are some of the things to look out for if you're considering it? So I'm going to run through some here. If you've got any particular worries, do comment down below and I'll address those as well. But here are some of the common ones. First of all, consider your options. In terms of the support model, if you like. So I first got into working with overseas staff probably 14 years ago. And like was very common back then, I utilised the services of home-based virtual assistants. It was kind of the start of the gig economy, and it would be very much sort of project-based. I need this task done, I need that task done. And that worked okay. There are some downsides, which I'll get to in a moment. But then once I really got into it and I started finding lots of things that I wanted to do, but I couldn't really access the resources here locally, I really started to get on the bandwagon and hire more virtual staff overseas. And then I went to an office-based option. I'm not going to name names or anything like that, but it was a remote staffing organisation in the Philippines. It all appeared okay, but under the surface, basically it was a sweatshop and it was very disappointing. So I tried the home-based, I tried the office-based, and I got to the point of thinking, I can do this better, and I set up my own virtual assistant business to support my business, which is a consulting business. And then lots of other people came to me to ask if they could kind of tap into it. And it's grown from there. And now we support all kinds of businesses. So that's kind of my own journey through it. And you'll understand when I start talking about some of these mistakes that people make, why I wanted to set my own up. So the second point I wanted to raise is make sure that everything's legal. Do get your own tax advice and so on locally about hiring overseas staff. Make sure all of that is okay. You do need to make sure that the staff you're hiring overseas, be that in India, Philippines, wherever else, that everything's okay at that end too. That's where we were kind of led astray in the early days before doing it ourselves. So for example, you've got to make sure that your overseas staff are paying all the right taxes and anything else they have to pay, sort of pension schemes, superannuation, health funds, that they're getting paid appropriately and all that kind of stuff. So that's predominantly the main reason I set up my own virtual assistant business, to make sure that all of that was done 100%, by the rules and looking after the team. Because at the end of the day, if it's not done well, not only could it backfire on you, but it's going to backfire on your team members. So be professional, get it set up properly. So for example, in my own virtual assistant business, we make sure that everybody pays into health funds, they have insurance funds. I think I've talked about this on the channel before, but we kind of went the extra mile there to make sure that they had really good cover. So that's really important. The third thing then is, and again, this might be a decision point for you, if you're a small business and you're thinking, well, we'll just hire somebody who's home-based versus, through an agency or a remote staffing, remote VA organisation. Think about support. So in the early days of trying virtual assistants, I did have a couple of home-based. They would disappear on me. They'd say, "Oh, the internet went down," or I never really knew quite what was happening. And I don't want this to sound like I don't trust people, but that was one of the reasons that I set up my own business as well, so that everybody was working in the office and that they were supervised and so on. It wasn't primarily to make sure that they were there, during office hours and being productive, but it was to make sure they had the right support, HR support, IT support. That there wasn't just one dodgy internet connection. There were three. There was sort of fail safes and all that kind of stuff. So. However you're going to engage with virtual assistants, make sure you check into all of that and make sure that support is there. Number 4, I would say, is do your research and make sure that you're paying appropriately. And that can be make sure you're not paying too little, make sure you're not paying too much, that it's fair, reasonable and reliable. That is really, really important. When you've got remote staff working in economies that are maybe not as attractive as yours, being a little bit late on salaries and things can be extremely distressing. So make sure all of that is right on the ball and nobody's ever exposed. The 5th point I would mention is if you want success in working with remote staff and virtual assistants, hire well. I don't think I'm actually that good at hiring people, I have to admit. But I've had greater success, I think, at hiring really good people in my virtual assistant business, probably than I have here in Australia. And that's strange, isn't it? I don't know why that is, but hire well. And so what do I mean by that? Make sure that you have a very clear job description in terms of your expectation. Make sure that whoever is doing the hiring understands that job description and that they're looking for the right people. Have in your mind a clear set of priorities in terms of what you're looking for. And that's maybe where I digress slightly, because in my mind, I'm just wondering which one to put at the top, but I obviously need really great communication skills. So wherever they're based, I'm a native English speaker. I want really good English language skills. I'm looking for communication skills. I'm looking for a degree of confidence. My first personal assistant that I hired in the Philippines was outstanding. And I mean this in the nicest possible way, but she did a sell job on me, I think. She was with me for many years. But when I interviewed her remotely, I was faced with this dynamo who was really confident, was going to, support me in all of the things that I needed, and we were going to do outstanding things together. It's only some months later I found out that she was 19 and it was her first job. She was outstanding, So how have I been lucky enough to get people like that? Communication skills. That confidence, not overconfidence, but drive, energy, and the ability to learn. People who are inquisitive, who are teachable. So I'm not necessarily looking for somebody who's already got the skills. Now, that doesn't apply in every role, of course. If I'm trying to hire someone who's going to build websites or something, they need to know how to build websites. But there are lots of other roles. Maybe social media manager or something like that, to a degree customer service, that can easily be trained if the person's got the right attitude and the foundational skills. So hire well is particularly important. And in fact, I've got a video on the channel where I actually, with the applicant's permission, videoed the interview. I might share that down below. So hire well. Next one is training. You can't expect people to be up and running on day one. You wouldn't expect that with people working in your office. Do invest time in training. My experience with particularly Filipino virtual assistants is that they're really good at training themselves too. Given some direction, let's say, I'm doing it all the time with my team. It might be, there's this new software tool which looks interesting. Could you check it out? And they go, oh yeah. I mean, I'll quite often say to my team, I need a tool to do this. Go and have a look. And they'll research and come back and say, here's three, here's the different costs, different functionality, you know, and I'll say, which one do you recommend? And they'll say, this one. I say, great, let's buy that. Learn how to use it, will you? So there's some great online learning resources around there. But when it comes to things specifically about your business, so think maybe of a customer service role or something like that, you've got to train them in how you do it. And I found the secret in good training with remote staff is because, you know, they're going to be a little bit nervous. You know, they're working for this potentially quite large organisation. They're overseas. They haven't met you necessarily face to face. The thing I found is to allow people to make mistakes and allow them to ask questions. And I've done this from day one with that superb PA that I had, you know, 12 years ago. Every discussion we had, you know, and these simple things, it would be like, this is how I'd like you to book my accommodation or book my flights. You know, you go onto the Qantas website, you need to understand that, you know, Tullamarine Airport is an hour from the city and bad traffic. You know, if the meeting's at 9, work out the travel time and when to book the flight. You know, create some simple instructions. She then created the instruction for booking travel based on that discussion. And then I would always end any sort of training session by saying, you know, is there anything you didn't understand there? If there's any questions you've got? And it just became a mantra. So, you know, it's that trust and approachability, I think, during the training that really pays dividends. And then probably the last one is, you know, retention of people. There's this sense, I think, within the virtual assistant sort of industry community that it's a high churn industry, that people don't stay in it long, that they do it between jobs. I think that's probably due to the employer. I've found actually the opposite. I don't know the exact numbers, but if I looked at our organisation, Virtual Done Well, there would be quite a few people who've been with us more than 10 years. Loads more than 8, 7, 6. Very, very low churn. I have a team of people working with me directly, 5 who've all been with me for a number of years. Some, sorry folks if I can't remember exactly, 6 or 7 years at least, probably more. I'm thinking of our marketing systems manager. So there we go. Retention is there, but it's about treating people well, communicating well, and you can have very low churn of people. So there we go, some things to think about. Some mistakes that people make, some considerations if you're going to hire virtual assistants. I'd love to hear down below if you've got any questions about virtual assistants, any particular fears about it. As I mentioned, I'll put some links down below, some handy links that you can look at. If I might put that recorded interview. I'll put a link down to Virtual Done Well, our own virtual assistant business. You can have a look and see how that works. Oh, I was going to tell you how it's different. I left that till the end. So why it's different is that it's basically set up as a social enterprise. So I've got a day job. I run a management consulting company. I used to run 2 or 3. And I set up Virtual Done Well to provide back office support for my business. So it was never set up to be, you know, a profit-making thing for me from the start. Never was. So we set it up basically as a social enterprise to provide really good jobs and working conditions for people in an area of the Philippines where it's not that easy to get a really good job. It's also an area that has 5 universities, so there's lots of good people there, but not so easy to get good jobs there. So that was the premise on which it was set up. And then a lot of friends and colleagues started to come along and say, look, could we tap into this resource? Could you hire some people for us? And it kind of snowballed. And now we're supporting all kinds of organisations. And any little profit that it does make generally gets turned back into, what's the word I'm looking for? Supporting local charities. So it is set up as a social enterprise for that purpose. Also, our clients all get charity certificates. So the little extra that we have, we give to charities around the world, and we share that with our clients as well. So it really is kind of a feel-good organisation. I love it. But it was never set up really as a sort of a commercial thing to keep me going in my old age. It's there to provide great jobs for great people, and it's there to provide some great clients with some great support. So there we go, some thoughts on virtual assistant businesses. Do check out the links below. If you found this of interest, do subscribe, and I'll see if we can get some more videos out for you. Bye for now.